Hi everyone, my name is Natalie. Today I'm finally going to be doing my goals video that I usually do at the end of the year. Basically I'm going to do what I usually do and do a retrospective at the beginning, looking back on 2021 and my 3 reading goals, and then share with you my new reading goals for 2022. So most of you are probably familiar with at least 2 of my reading goals for 2021. The first one is Invisible Cities reading project. So Invisible Cities was a project that I have been running since the beginning of 2021 with a group of friends on BookTube and on Bookish blogs and on Discord. We've been doing all of these chats in different places, but most of the conversations from the community aspect has been on our Discord. But the Invisible Cities project was meant to inspire both us and others to read more translated literature from all over the world, and that is something we've been doing all through 2021 and are continuing in 2022. So my original goal with this was to read from all 3 countries that we selected each month to read books from. And fairly early on I realized that I couldn't hit every country we visited. It was just not feasible for me, both in the sense of accessibility to all of these books, but also just time-wise I couldn't manage it. And then I did a bit of a reading goals check-in at the middle point of 2021, where I said that I would like to read at least 1 book per country per month going forward, where we had decreased the number of countries to 2 per month from August onwards. And still that has not happened, and I had to come to terms with the fact that I couldn't read all of the countries. It just wasn't manageable for me, and also I feel like it put a lot of stress on something that didn't have to be stressful. The project itself and all of the rewards I've gotten out of it, it has still been very successful in terms of exposure, in terms of conversation, and that has been the important thing about it. So I don't have any regrets when it comes to not reading all of the countries that we've had. I have sort of reflected on my journey with Invisible Cities in our Invisible Cities tag. I will link that video in the description below in case you're interested. But I also already mentioned my reading goals for 2022 in connection with Invisible Cities in that. I will get back to that later in this video. But yeah, that was my first goal for 2021, was to do Invisible Cities reading project with reading as many countries as I could and reading more translated literature, and to chronicle in some way what I was reading and doing otherwise for Invisible Cities. With the chronicling, it is something I realized that I don't actually enjoy doing vlogs. It is something I enjoy watching, but I do not enjoy doing them because it takes the spontaneity out of it for me, and it becomes something that feels too much like I'm performing for a particular purpose, or I'm doing things, watching movies, listening to music for someone else rather than for myself, and therefore I'm not enjoying it as much. So that is something I will not be doing in the next year. I will obviously talk about things that I'm doing and watching, and otherwise if it's a favorite, if I want to recommend it, if I want to highlight it in any other way. But I will not be doing some kind of serialized thing to do that. And that is, again, definitely something I've learned about myself and about how I want to do this project. But in terms of reading more translated literature, which was kind of my personal aim with this goal, that has been very successful. More than half from non-English countries and languages. And that has been beyond what I was expecting. So this has definitely been this project has spurred me on to read more books in translation and from different parts of the world that I might not have gotten exposed to otherwise or hadn't before, and just created more curiosity about different parts of the world, which is all I wanted from this project. The second goal I had for 2021 was something I like to call Follow the Path, but I have also called it reading deeply. The reason behind this goal was that sometimes when you're part of the bookish community online, booktube and bookstagram and all of these things, you get stuck on the various things going on. There's always some kind of read along or readathon, themed reading challenges, always something fun and exciting that you can take part in. And it is something that I have found that I very easily get swept into. I get inspired by other people's enthusiasm. That is something I've learned about myself in the last few years, and therefore I tend to jump on various projects that I see other people do when they're very enthusiastic about it. And the purpose behind this goal was to kind of take a step back and look back onto what I am interested in personally. When you're reading a book that talks about something and you want to read more on that topic, but you sort of put it to the side and think eventually I'll get to that. That was what I wanted to change. I wanted to more often allow myself to just follow wherever my curiosity wanted to go, even if it meant putting all of my other projects to the side and just doing what I felt like doing with my reading. As I said, I did a mid-year check-in or consideration of my reading goals in 2021, and I wanted to adjust this goal with being more focused on reading more by one particular author, because I realized that something I am very often do is I read a book by an author. I find authors I'm really interested in reading more from. I might even buy more books from that author, but I never get to them, or it takes a long time until I get to them. And so I wanted to read more from the same author. Once I found an author I'm interested in, I wanted to more quickly jump onto their next book, to find writers that speak to me on a personal level. And with both types of this goal, I think I have done that in certain respects. So with the Follow the Path, reading deeply, follow your curiosity type stuff, I have read more nature writing this year than I usually do. In part before the Springathon and then onwards, pretty much since March until July, August, I read a lot of nature writing, and it has definitely been a bigger part of my nonfiction this year than it was the year before. Another area that I've been reading more on is music nonfiction, as I've mentioned a few times, and sometimes that the sort of curiosity and concentrated on a particular topic or a rabbit hole of reading has been connected with the Invisible Cities project as well. Like, for example, I read a lot of Japanese books in January last year for Invisible Cities and for January in Japan that is happening again this year. And Mexico, for example, was another country that I got to several books in March for Invisible Cities. Reading in a way where the books sort of connect in various ways. Either they're on the same topic, they're written by the same author, they have something else in common. I find that often a very rewarding experience because you build upon your knowledge. Because you have some pre-knowledge, you notice other things because you're not always a newbie to a topic. And that is something I often found very rewarding as a reader, and I think in topics and themes I have done that to some extent this year. With the author thing, I have definitely done that. I have discovered a few authors that I have really enjoyed reading more from. Some authors that I've revisited this year from previous years, and some authors that I've read for the first time this year and also read more than one book by. Jessica J. Lee, Mariana Enriquez, Deborah Levy, I've read all of her nonfiction this year. I had only read a fiction book by her previously and had not enjoyed it, whereas the nonfiction trilogy I absolutely loved. I have read Beisua and Eileen Willow's novels this year as well. So there's been a lot of fantastic finds. The last goal I had for 2021 was to decrease my TBR and buy less books. And I will not really go into any details here because I have actually done a video, a revisit of the state of my TBR video very recently. I will link that below, where I talk about the numbers I had starting off in 2021 and the numbers I had at the end of 2021 and some of my general takeaways. Overall, definitely a very successful goal. I feel like for me, it was both a learning curve and it gave me a lot of food for thought that I'm going to be continuing to work on and to work with in the coming years. And I think it informs my way of thinking about my book collecting in a general way as well, which I feel like is very helpful. So I'm glad that I made a push for this one, and I think it was needed for 2021, and this is something that will be ongoing as a goal in the background. But I feel like the hardest work that I have to do with this, I have already done. So as I said, go check that video out in case you're interested in some of those, some of the takeaways as I mentioned that I had and the progress with that in detail. So that is the retrospective aspect of this video. Now on to my 2022 goals. So for 2022 I have one goal that is more structured, one that is more of an intention, and one that is going to be hard work. The structured goal is Invisible Cities again. Invisible Cities reading project is continuing in 2022. So my basic reading goal for Invisible Cities in 2022 is to choose one of our 2 countries per month and read one book for that country. That is the reading goal out of the way. The other additional goal for Invisible Cities is that I want to choose one weekend each month where I sort of do a bit of a deep dive for that country I chose. So for example, in January we have Algeria and Singapore. I have already decided that I will be focusing on Algeria. And so one of the weekends in January I will be focusing on Algeria and find hopefully a movie to watch, some kind of music to listen to, see if I can find some recipe that I can try, and of course read my book. So I will read the book over the month whenever I feel like it, obviously, but I thought just having a weekend that I sort of focused in on other aspects of the country and in other medias that we also encourage in Invisible Cities. That is something I have enjoyed a lot in 2021 and that I want to do more of going forward. So as I mentioned before, I will not be vlogging. That. It will just be a personal thing that will be a fun thing to do, and I figure that if I decide already that I will be doing one weekend dedicated to that country, I can spend some time planning and finding a recipe and finding all of the ingredients I need and all of that, so that I can actually do the thing that it is possible to do, because sometimes I think I have had too ambitious goals and not really have the time to sit down and get all of the resources I need for doing anything of those things. So that is my goal for Invisible Cities in 2022, to read, choose one country that I read one book from, and to spend a weekend sometime during the month that I try out other things that I can find related to that country. The next goal is the intention thing, and that is to read more poetry. Poetry is something that I often neglect in my reading life. I don't read a lot of poetry over the years. I I think in 2021 I read maybe 2 collections of poetry. I know I read one Swedish one, and I feel like I read something else, and that is usually how it goes. It is very rare that I read more than 2 or 3 collections over a year, and it is actually something I really enjoy reading when I find something that speaks to me. I find it is such a different type of reading that requires different ways of thinking and digesting and reflecting. And I feel like it is something I don't allow myself to spend the time to find the poetry I like. And so I end up not reading much of it. And especially I feel like with poetry, but it's probably true for all kinds of books, but I feel like particularly for me with poetry, it is such a subjective thing, what you react to, what style of poetry works for you. And a lot of the poetry that I see other people read doesn't work for me personally. Doesn't resonate with me, and that is what I need poetry to do. So I don't need to understand poetry in order to enjoy it, but I need to feel something. And I think, as I said, the reason I'm not reading much of it is because I need to actually spend some time exploring it and finding the niches, finding the writers that work for me. And so that is what I'm hoping to do in 2022, to spend that time to find what works for me, to try a few collections out, and just have fun with that exploration and with that journey. So I haven't set on any particular number. It's more, again, a intention, that something I want to prioritize in my reading. And then the last goal I have for 2022 is the hard goal, which probably won't sound hard when I say it, but it is for me. And that is, I want to read one thing at a time. And there's a caveat. I've written these down in my bullet journal, and I've already said read one in parentheses or few at a time. Basically, I want to more often read 1, maybe 2 books at a time. A lot of you probably already know that I usually read several books at a time. It has been my reading style over the last few years. I think most of the time I've been on BookTube, I have been a multi-reader, juggling different books at the same time, often with varying types of genres and formats. In many instances, it is a good thing. It means that I think I read more because I read this way, because whenever I'm tired of one particular type of book, I will just move on to the next thing. It doesn't leave a lot of slow time with reading, because as soon as I'm not interested in one thing, I just move on to the next thing. It's more efficient that way. There's a few things that I don't like about it. One of the things is that I find my concentration is split with several different types of books. It takes me a while to settle into a book, and whenever I split all of my reading concentration on different types of books, each time I come back to a book, I have to settle into it. Even worse when it's been a while and I start to forget about the earlier parts of the book, and I have to reinstate myself in the book, as well as remember what has already happened. And I find that it's not always the most fun way of reading for me. When you're reading just one book at a time, you can sort of just be completely dedicated to that thing. And to be fully immersed in it is something I want to do, and to spend some time thinking about what I'm reading and stepping away from the book and then going back to it and not having anything else taking away from my concentration. And to finish the book, and again having more time to just reflecting on the book's entirety. And I think the immersion is key really for why I want to do this. So this is gonna be a bit of a experiment. I'm not entirely sure if I will be successful in doing this, if I'll notice that this is not the reading style I want or need. If it isn't working for me, then obviously I will learn that, and I will change how I approach my reading. But it is something I want to try to to try and to see what is working for me, where the balance is. So that was my retrospective and my reading goals for 2022. I would love to hear if you have made any reading goals for 2022, any reading challenges or reading projects that you're part of, or anything else you're aiming for, any intentions in 2022. I always really enjoy hearing people reflect on what they want to do with their reading in the beginning of the year. As well as a retrospective and looking back at how they actually went. But yeah, that was all I wanted to say. I hope you're doing fantastic, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.